Hello again. So this has been quite an intense program up until now. So this is the visual part of today. And so I want you all to sit back and just absorb the pictures that we're going to talk about with Adrees. It is such a thrill for me to be here on this stage with Adrees, my dear, dear colleague. Adrees has spent the past 30 years capturing the world with his camera. He has covered just about everything. Wars, protests, sports, migration flows, and everything in between. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of his pictures, and Adrees is going to tell us about how he practices his craft. So let's start. So we're going to start by talking about, this is an image that you took that won Reuters its first ever Pulitzer Prize. Tell us where you were, what was going on.
So in this picture, I'm in Yangon City Center. It's September 27, 2007. This is the Myanmar military's response to a street protest. This is the end of the Saffron Revolution. And I'm standing on a bridge. To get to this point, I had been applying for visas to get into Myanmar for 4 years and went through one passport after another. A few weeks before this protest, I had just got another passport, and I felt like I knew how to, find the way to get in. And I came in with a satellite phone because there was no internet and phone. The military really liked to control their information. So when I arrived on September 23rd, this was the scene. Monks were protesting through the streets. This is the Shui Dagon Pagoda. It's the holiest site in Myanmar. And the monks would start here chanting a mantra.
What was the mood? We see it here.
So inside the Shui Dagon, it was like heaven. Them chanting, it's just golden, beautiful structure. I've never seen it before. It's just like, it was just stunning. And then when you get to the street, the protest would start from that pagoda and go to town center to the Soleil Pagoda. And the reason they were protesting is there was a rise in fuel prices several weeks later. And in the past, the people would come out and protest, but there were crackdowns. And so this was directly affecting the people, but it was affecting the monks, because in Buddhist society, the people give alms, and the monks had no food in their bowls. And that's what this picture represents. So they took to the streets. And a few days in, the monks went from being, from hundreds of them to thousands of them. And so on the night of September 26th, they cracked down on the monks. They went and arrested all of them.
And give us a scene, because what follows now is sort of a remarkable moment. Set the scene for us. What was the day like? What was, tell us how it was unfolding.
So that morning, it was eerie. Nobody was outside. I went outside. I had no idea what had happened. The streets were sealed off. So I went all the way around town, came back to the city center, where I saw this group of men coming out. So because they had locked up the monks the night before, the people finally came out. And this was the moment. And it took about an hour, and the crowd went from dozens to hundreds to thousands. It was completely packed. And I had climbed a bridge, because from previous history, this is what the military did, and I came prepared for it. I didn't want to be in the middle of it. I felt like the safest space that I could be would be on this bridge.
And it was a way also where you could capture the enormity of it from stepping away. So this was one of those cases that actually stepping and doing a panorama view would be more indicative than maybe up close, which
right. If something happens in a crowd, if you're not exactly in that location, then it's hard to photograph it. So into an hour later, these army trucks start to arrive. I see them from a distance, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's happening, And I set my settings to 1,000 shutter speed to stop action because I felt like, oh, people are going to start running. There's possibly shootings going to happen. I set a high aperture.
You might have to explain some of these technical terms, too.
And right after that army truck arrived, the shooting started. And I was looking at the crowd, and everybody was running. We have high-velocity bullets, sounds of high-velocity bullets all around. And from the corner of my eye, I see Kenji Nagai, or I see this man falling backwards. I thought he had just been trampled. I start instantly photographing. I take the first frame where you can see the bullet wound, take a second frame where he's turning over to photograph the crowd. There's a soldier standing above him. Third frame where I feel like he's trying to photograph the soldier now. And the last frame where he's contorted in pain. And after this point, I have these images, and I look all around me on the bridge, and everyone's hit the ground. I'm like the only one standing. So I'm like, okay, it's time to leave. So I was standing very close to the two men that you see up there standing, and I ran that direction to come down the stairways. And when I got to the stairways, they were gone. So I had to leap off, and I leapt into the street. A protester came and helped me up and took me to this bus stop right here where I'm standing. I turned around to see what was going on.
So let's just pause here for a second, because of course you needed to get out because everybody had gotten out, but you also needed to get out because you needed to get the image so that the world could see it.
Absolutely.
And so you leapt, and I can imagine that was not exactly, that was painful.
I had adrenaline going through me, so I felt pain, but it wasn't like my priority right then. And then I started following the protest, and I stood with them for another 30 minutes, and then I was like, oh, I got to get these pictures out. And I noticed a railway track that led back to the hotel that was parallel, so I followed it back because the military had closed off all the streets. Got back to the hotel and crawled to I opened the window of the hotel. I had set it up where I would have my satellite phone position, right part of the sky, and transmitted the image with a basic caption that said, a man lies injured after police and military opened fire on protesters, Yangon City Center. Basic caption.
And what happened when the world saw this image?
So after I transmitted these images, I'm on a sat phone. I have no communication, so I don't know what's going on. I'm trying to take care of my wounds or whatever, and trying to meet up with other colleagues that are in the same hotel. And the desk, their colleagues of Kenji Nagai realized that this was his colleague, so they, our colleagues found out, and we ended up updating the caption to saying that APF photojournalist Kenji Nagai was killed in the street protests.
That's what happened.
The following day, the picture from every major newspaper that you would consider a major newspaper around the world, all the way from LA Times to the Sydney Morning Herald. In particular, this one image on the front of the New York Times, this image was published on September 28, 2007, when the United Nations General Assembly was being held, and all the world leaders were there. And immediately, Myanmar got hit with sanctions from US, Canada, Australia, Japan, and the EU. And it took some time, some weeks and months and years later, where they ended up giving into sanctions. It helped the release of 2,000 political prisoners. It helped Aung San Suu Kyi out of house arrest, and the military promised to hold free elections.
Now, Adrees, of course, this was breaking news, right? You were there, and this was happening. But more recently, you've been working on sort of take time journalism, more long form visual investigation. So let's look at one of these. This was one. It was sort of a different way of storytelling, and you had extremely rare access to migration flows on the US-Mexico border. So again, sort of Where are you here? Who are these people?
So
Give us the scene.
I've been covering immigration since 2018, and I wanted to share a different narrative than what we generally see. So I was working the stretch, and I needed a landowner, so I got access to the property through him at the border. This is in Roma, Texas, and Ciudad Aleman, across in Mexico. And ended up getting access through the Border Patrol. They were tired of me. They were like, just do what you want. Through the Army was also there. They were like, okay, what is this guy doing? But I ended up befriending these smugglers and ended up going into Mexico and showing the process of these migrants being transferred from one end of the riverbank to the other. And this is Chino and Dane there, two smugglers photographing migrants before they get them on rafts. So they put them on rafts through the deepest parts of the river, and they would transfer them onto this island. And from that island, they would hide them in tall grass. And from the tall grass, once they had enough, we were looking at between 13, 15 migrants, they would then take them, raft them to the other side, through the other deeper part of the river.
Is this drone footage?
Yes, this is taken from a drone, yes. And these images are taken from dusk till dawn. So this is about 1 a.m. in the morning. This is Chino. They've already run 30 migrants. There's another 30 coming. So I'm on this island that you saw in the previous frame, hanging out with Dana and Chino as they wait for more migrants. And this is also taken with the mirrorless. There's no clicking. It's just, you can't hear any noise. And you can just hear the river flow is quite like this majestic. And behind me, you have 3 or 4 young youth migrants hiding in that tall grass. And then they put them on rafts, and of course, this is the final stretch. This is Naomi. She's 13 years old from Guatemala. So in this picture, the migrants are wading across, and once in a while, their raft would deflate, and they would be forced to lock arms. So they were locking arms and inching towards the U.S. riverbank.
I mean, hugely dangerous.
Very dangerous. Yeah, especially because they're kids and they're shorter. And these are mothers holding children now climbing the bank on the U.S. side. They're halfway in mud. Incredibly difficult.
What does this one show?
So this is Ashley. She's 10. She had a seizure, and we think it was because it was extremely hot this day, over 104 Fahrenheit.
So, is this at the end of the journey? What happens then?
This is again a drone picture. Just wanted to show where these migrants end up coming out into neighborhoods. I mean, sitting outside people's houses is one of the most odd things, And often they're in very remote areas too, but in this case, they came out into the subdivision, surrounded by Border Patrol agents. And here kids dance.
What did you feel when you shot this picture?
It's nice I sense that relief in everybody. This is what you really sense is like they've made it. They're finally smiling because the journey is so difficult.
I mean, Adrees, seeing the world through your eyes, through your lens, it's a great privilege in some ways. It's also a great responsibility. Tell us what makes you so passionate about the work that you do.
It is a responsibility. First, it started with just me taking pictures. I still love taking pictures. And then, when I was in Asia, covering Asia, I really felt this sense of responsibility, and I felt it was a duty. And now I'm at a place where, in my 3rd decade, where I'm really enjoying talking to people and making connections. Then it's now taking pictures, having that responsibility, and doing it from a perspective which I feel like I bring that, not many other journalists can, is a diverse perspective of Pakistani Texan. Pakistani
Texan. And on that note, that's the end of this session, and this is now lunchtime. Thank you very much to Adrees.